The Jets are off to a great start to 2022. What has been going right? Why is this team so much better than the preseason expectations? That's what we'll talk about today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, November 15th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Well, the Jets are coming out of their bye. The practices will begin tomorrow as the Jets begin to install their game plan for this weekend's game against the New England Patriots. And the way things played out this past weekend with Buffalo losing, if the Jets win on Sunday, they are in first place in the AFC. Who would have ever thought 10 games into the season the Jets would have a shot to be leading the division, a division with Buffalo in it, a division with a solid Miami team, and a division with a Patriots team that's over 500. In fact, it's probably not going to stay this way because these teams will play against each other over the final few weeks of the season. But if the season ended today, all 4 AFC East teams would be in the playoffs, which would be the first time that's ever happened. It's an amazing story, and the Jets are an amazing story. They are one of the surprises of the NFL this season with a 6-3 record. And of course, their last game right before their bye was a win over the Buffalo Bills. Today we're going to talk about why the Jets are 6-3, particularly why the Jets have done so well relative to preseason expectations, because heading into the season, there were very few people who thought the Jets were going to have a winning season, myself included. So what's been going right? Why are the Jets so much better? What did we miss in the preseason? I think you have to begin by talking about this rookie class. This has been an outstanding rookie class for the Jets. Now, I'll tell you something. After any NFL draft, doesn't matter which team's fans you're talking about. You can go on to the team's fans podcasts, their message boards, blogs. You find a team website online. After every single NFL draft, every single year, their fans will say, this is the best draft our team has had in recent memory. They always say that. The Jets actually, in 2022, are giving you one of the best rookie classes in recent memory for this franchise. And it's not totally unexpected because the Jets did have 4 picks in the top 40 and 7 of the top 120 picks. So after the draft, many people were excited about the Jets. The Jets were getting great grades from the draft analysts, and it should have been no surprise because when you pick that high in the NFL draft, odds are you're going to get a lot of the top prospects, which is exactly what happened with the Jets this year. People were acting shocked. Well, there really was no reason for shock. Of course the Jets were going to get great draft grades with that many top picks. You don't praise the Jets for picking a lot of the top players. You praise them for putting themselves in a position where they had 4 top 40 picks because there were some really smart trades in there. Namely the Jamal Adams trade, which netted them 2 first-round picks, one of which they made this year, which ended up being Garrett Wilson, and the Sam Darnold trade, when the Jets got a second-round pick for Sam Darnold, a quarterback who did not pan out at all, and they also got a 4th-round pick and a 6th-round pick. That's as much as anything what you praise the Jets for, but you also have to praise them now because it looks like they absolutely nailed those picks. And heading into the season, these players looked good on paper, but you never know how a rookie's going to perform. And that's true in a couple senses. It's true from the standpoint that, a guy could be a very decorated draft pick. doesn't mean he's going to be as good as you're expecting, though. And we certainly know that that's been the case through the years for the Jets, where the Jets, how many top picks have the Jets made where you were expecting somebody to be great, and it just has not panned out for them. This year's Jets draft class has really lived up to the hype. I mean, you're getting contributions from almost everybody the Jets drafted. Really, Jeremy Ruckert's the only guy who has not contributed at all from this draft class. You want to talk about Sauce Gardner, who's playing at a borderline all-pro level. Talk about Garrett Wilson, who's really stepped things up the last couple of weeks. Played 3 outstanding games. A guy who, if he continues on his pace from the last 2 games, he's going to start generating some Rookie of the Year buzz. And speaking of Rookie of the Year buzz, if Breece Hall had not gotten hurt, he looked like he was going to be one of the top contenders. It kind of takes you back to the year 2000. That was a year where the Jets had 4 first-round picks. They had their own first-round pick. They got one from New England because Bill Belichick went from the Jets to New England and became New England's head coach. And then they got 2 from Tampa Bay from a trade when they dealt Keyshawn Johnson to the Buccaneers. And those 4 picks the Jets made were Sean Ellis, John Abraham, Chad Pennington, and Anthony Becht. And the Jets also added Lavernius Coles in the 3rd round that year. And that's a legendary Jets draft class because it was another situation where they had a lot of early picks, and they hit on practically all of them. And you look at this Jets draft class, you have 3 guys who are playing at a really high level, but Jermaine Johnson's looked pretty solid in some limited action. Now he's been injured; he just got back. And that 2000 Jets draft class, not everybody was a star. Chad Pennington looked like he was going to be an upper echelon quarterback before he got hurt. John Abraham, Sean Ellis both made a couple of Pro Bowls in their careers. John Abraham was actually, for a stretch, one of the top pass rushers in the league. But the 4th first-round pick that year was Anthony Becht, who was a good blocking tight end. He was a solid role player. Now, if Anthony Becht's your best draft pick, it's probably not a great class. But if he's your 4th or 5th best player, it's probably a really good class, as the 2000 class was for the Jets. And Jermaine Johnson's, I view him as kind of like the Anthony Becht of this class because he has not really reached the level so far of the other 3 guys the Jets drafted early this year, but he's still giving you positive contributions. There was a play against Buffalo where he tackled Josh Allen. Essentially, it was an open field tackle where he ran Josh Allen down. Not very easy to do. And it feels like every time I'm watching him in a game, he's making a play. He's helping the Jets out. And beyond that, you have Max Mitchell, who was very up and down, and really not ready yet. But Michael Clemens has been one of the surprises of this draft class. And I have to say, I feel like I'm responsible for this. In the show I did after the NFL draft, I said Michael Clemens was the one pick I did not understand. And that was pretty much a guarantee that Michael Clemens was going to be great. He, of course, had a spectacular preseason and has not really lived up to those levels. He's playing against starters now. In the preseason, he was playing against backups, 3rd stringers. But he's doing a solid job, especially against the run. So you're getting a lot of contributions from your rookie class. And one thing I think people miss in the NFL is building a good team is not necessarily all about filling your holes. It's just about adding a couple of great players can really move the needle for a team. And the Jets have gotten great play out of the rookie class, but they've also gotten, again, quality role players, talking about defensive linemen like Johnson and Clemens. And you could not project that they would have this type of impact. Even with all the early picks, you never really know. There's a lot of projecting going on, and when you project rookies, you tend to be pretty conservative. That's the right way to do things. When you get performance like this, though, it turns a team around quickly, and that's what the Jets are getting. Of course, that's not the only thing that's going right for the Jets, though. There's a defense on this team that was one of the worst in the NFL. It may have been the worst defense in the league last year. This year, it's become a major strength. It's become one of the top units in the league. As we continue this Tuesday episode of Locked On Jets, we're going to talk about what's going right for this Jets defense. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're a daily fantasy player, you might want Garrett Wilson this weekend. Hopefully he can go for more than 100 yards, both for the Jets and for your daily fantasy team. And if you play daily fantasy, let me tell you about PrizePicks. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. So it's not just the NFL. You can play the NBA. You can play the NHL, the PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, esports, MMA, tennis, boxing, and disc golf. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's just that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So that means if you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. And don't forget to use promo code Locked On at sign-up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 using PrizePicks. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by SimpliSafe. We're about to talk about how good the Jets defense has been this year. And when you're talking about your home, you also want a great defense. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Jets listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. In an emergency, 24/7 monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report for a third straight year. A 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day. That's less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. And with the top-rated SimpliSafe app, stay in complete control of your system, anytime, anywhere. Arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your camera, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's SimpliSafe, SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today we're talking about why the Jets are beating expectations so far. There were not many people preseason who had the Jets at 6-3 at this point. In fact, the only guy who did it may have been, I don't know if you followed social media, but there's a guy on Twitter who back in August flipped a coin to predict each Jets game so far this season. Flip a coin. Heads they win, tails they lose, or something like that. He did it for every Jets game, and he's got every game right so far. That's the only guy who's done it, the guy who flipped the coin before the season. The rest of us are a little bit surprised. I mean, even I was kind of optimistic about the Jets heading into the season. I was not 6-3 playing for first place after Game 10 optimistic, though. But one of the big reasons the Jets have surpassed expectations has been the play of this defense. This is a defense-oriented team at the moment, and it's surprising because last year the defense was, well, awful. It was one of the worst units in the league. I mean, you can think back to how many terrible games they had. I mean, the Jets are coming off their bye this week. They had to New England for a game. Last year, they played a miserable game. They gave up more than 50 points to New England off their bye on the road in Foxborough. I mean, there was the game against the Colts where Indianapolis and Jonathan Taylor ran the ball at will on them. He ran all over them. You can name, I mean, I could go on. If you watched this team last year, you know how bad their defense was. It's a lot better this year. And I think maybe the driving force behind it, there are lots of reasons the Jets defense is better this year, but maybe the biggest reason is the play of Quinnen Williams. And I have to admit it, I thought Quinnen Williams was just a good player. And to be honest with you, I defended him because there were lots of Jets fans who said, number three overall pick, you got to be a superstar. I don't think that's really fair. Look at the recent history of number 3 overall picks. It's not a guarantee you're getting a superstar. That's one of the things that happens around draft season. When a team gets a high pick, the fan base assumes that they're just getting an automatic superstar. You can easily miss on those picks. And even if you don't hit on those picks, a guy may not be a superstar. And that's okay. Quinnen Williams was a really good player his first 3 seasons in the NFL. But clearly he's taken it to another level this year. He has been as good as any defensive tackle in the NFL. And I do not say that lightly. I'm not one to give out praise that high. But he's been phenomenal this year. He has a chance to be all-pro. He's been unblockable, both against the run and against the pass. And you cannot sell short what he's done against the run because while he was not a weakness last year against the run, he took a step back from year 2. In 2020, he was really, really good against the run. Last year, he was not quite as good, and I think that was part of the problem. But, there were issues all over the line last year. Sheldon Rankins is playing at a much higher level than he was a year ago. And I think you got to look at the corners. We talked about Sauce Gardner a bit in the first segment from that rookie class, but also DJ Reed and the growth of Michael Carter II in the slot. To me, that's like one of the unsung heroes of this team, Michael Carter II, because Sauce Gardner gets plenty of attention, and rightly so. Sauce Gardner has been absolutely outstanding. DJ Reed, He flies under the radar a little bit more, but I think people get DJ Reed's really good. He doesn't get quite as much praise as Sauce Gardner, but he does, people get that DJ Reed's really good. Michael Carter II, nobody's talking about him. He's been outstanding in the slot. When you have three guys who can match up against other teams' receivers, you've really got something. And Quan Alexander, we talked about the linebacker, and the linebacker play has been up and down for the Jets this year. And it's trending up. I think Quincy Williams has had a good couple of weeks, but Quan Alexander's turned into like a really quiet, and it was a late signing. It was a signing made in the summer, but Quan Alexander's turned into a solid player. And, the safeties have been up and down, but when the safeties have been good, they've really been quite good for the Jets. But really, I think it shows you the team building of the front office and the coaching staff. And they prioritize the important positions. Positions are not equal in the National Football League. And in today's NFL, which is very much a passing league, and listen, you follow football, this is not like a new trend. This is not a cyclical thing. For the last 120 years, high-level football has been skewing more and more leaning towards the passing game. Passing game just keeps getting more and more important as the history of the game progresses. So you want a defensive line. You want guys who can get after the quarterback, and you want guys who can cover. You need corners. If I can only be good in two spots, I want them to be defensive line and corner. I can live with up and down linebacker play. You'd like to have good safety play, but you can live with it to a certain extent if it's not great safety play. Now, listen, you'd rather be good at these positions than bad, but the two most important spots for most defenses are going to be defensive line and corner, and the Jets have gotten big upgrades from both spots, and that's the biggest reason. Those are the biggest reasons this defense is playing so well this season. But it's not just the defense. The offense is producing as well, and there are key players on both sides of the ball who have really stepped up this year. This time last year, Joe Douglas's 2021 free agent class was not looking so stellar, but you've had guys have big bounce-back seasons, and we'll talk about them as we close out this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is the best-tasting protein bar on the market. A Jets 6-3 start is outstanding. So are these Built Bars. And I got to tell you about some new flavors. There's cookie dough topper. There's coconut brownie bar. There's coconut brownie topper. There's also white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still incredibly tasty. And then there's candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. They are revolutionizing nutrition as we know it. Built Bars have 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low sugar and calories. 130 calories. Just sink your teeth into that first bite and you'll love it. Built, you got to try this. And you can get 15% off your order right now, no matter what you order, by using code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Again, that's code LOCKEDON15. It's one word with no space. LOCKED, number ON, number 1, number 5, LOCKEDON15 at Built, BUILT.com. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We're talking about why the Jets are exceeding expectations. We've talked about the rookie class, one of the driving forces. We've talked about the defense. Well, there are some players on the defense and some players on the offense who have stepped up this year. I talked about Quinnen Williams in the last segment, but this time last year, it really did not look like Joe Douglas had done very well in free agency. Jets signed a lot of players in the 2021 offseason and really did not get much production from them. And you're getting big bounce-back seasons from a number of these players. And to me, the number one guy is Sheldon Rankins. And I remember when Sheldon Rankins signed with the Jets, I thought he and Quinnen Williams were going to be an incredible duo at the defensive tackle position because Sheldon Rankins was a talented player, former first-round pick, who seemed like he was really developing into a star with the Saints before he suffered a career-altering Achilles injury. And then there were some signs late last season that maybe he was kind of recovered from that injury. Maybe he was starting to flash the guy who was breaking out in New Orleans. When he came to the Jets, and he got some pressures to the quarterback. He actually was decent as a pass rusher. But talking about that bad run game, Sheldon Rankins had a lot to do with that. We got to the offseason. The Jets could have saved around $5 million by cutting Rankins. And I have to admit, I was wrong on this. I thought they should have cut him. Well, Sheldon Rankins bounced back in a big way this year. He's having an outstanding season. Now, he's not playing at Quinnen Williams level. I'm not even sure he's playing at that high level he was playing for with the Saints before he got injured. But he's playing really well. And also on the defensive line, Carl Lawson. guy who's generating pressures at a very high rate. Is occasionally finishing a sack or two, but I think people underestimate just how important pressure is. I hear people mock the idea of generating pressure on a quarterback. It's kind of funny because these are the same people who rightly, when Zach Wilson struggles, point out how he's frequently under pressure. But for whatever reason, these people who tell you, well, Zach Wilson's under pressure a lot, they don't appreciate when Carl Lawson generates pressure. They say, well, he's not getting enough sacks. He's still finishing some sacks. But Carl Lawson's generating pressure at an exceptionally high rate for the Jets. He's playing really well, playing really solid football. Of course, he was injured last year. And I think that was, for last year's team, he was probably the player the Jets could least afford to lose. And I think if he was on the team last year, I'm not saying the Jets would have made the playoffs, but I think that the results would have generally been better. Carl Lawson's bounced back, though. I think he's playing really good football. And on the offensive side of the ball, a guy who got a lot of grief last year, not entirely unfairly, but Corey Davis. Corey Davis did not have a great year last year, but it always felt to me that people focused on Corey Davis's bad game. When Corey Davis had a bad game, people were all over him. He had a couple of good games last year, and people really did not talk much about him. Corey Davis is not a number one receiver. He's not a go-to guy. He's more of a complimentary player. But through his career, most of it at least, he's been a really solid receiver. He's been a guy who's been a good role player. And you could tell the trust Zach Wilson has in him. It was evident from game one last year. And this year, Zach's first game, he led a 10-point comeback in the fourth quarter. Who was the guy he was looking to on the key downs? It was Corey Davis. That was the receiver he trusted the most. Corey Davis is not the best receiver on the team. He's not the most talented receiver. He might be the receiver Zach Wilson trusts the most, though. And when you were talking about a quarterback's play, sometimes trusting in a receiver is as important as game-breaking ability. It sounds, maybe it sounds a bit extreme to say that, but I think there's something to it. It's not just about skill. Sometimes it's just about chemistry between a quarterback and a receiver. And Corey Davis has been really good for the Jets. Now, he's missed the last couple of games with an injury, but he's been a big part of the solution. And heading into next season, it's kind of funny. Heading into the off season, at least, a lot of people assumed Corey Davis was going to be cut because the Jets could save a decent amount of money off the cap. If he stays healthy and continues producing at the level, he's going to be a no-brainer keep because of that chemistry with Zach Wilson, because he fills an important role as kind of the veteran, the stable veteran, guy who's maybe not flashy, but a guy who does his job very effectively. The guy who's really helped the Jets out on offense this year. So I don't think that the free agent class of 2021 is as important as the rookies, but these guys help provide some veteran stability on a team that's depending on a lot of young players to fill key roles, to help provide impact. You're getting some quality role performances from the 2021 free agent class. And guys who really did not give the Jets a whole lot last year are stepping up in their second season with the team. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. It helps us out tremendously, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. So does giving this episode a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Have a great Tuesday. Send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow is our weekly mailbag episode.